I appreciate everybody. And then again, this is sort of a continuing little series on anticipating Catholic school, high school athletics. And as I told you before, the CNAA is kind of pivoting and working on some digital stuff, and this is part of the package. So obviously it's not the #1 priority right now. We all have other things to do, like worrying about actually having athletics. So, but eventually the nonprofit will get going, but this is content that is being posted on the website and shared and edited and cut. But obviously the purpose is still to just see what's going on around different schools and try to roundtable discussion, get some information. So here we go. I have, and actually Jolene is here, and David Small is checking in right now. I think, Jolene, you may have never been on this call, correct? Maybe you should introduce yourself. Just so people know what you do on this one.
All right. My name is Jolene Fugate. Hello. I am the commissioner for the West Catholic Athletic League, the 9 Catholic and Christian schools across the Bay Area. This is my little guy.
Hi.
Hi. Do you know everybody else? Jolene, we should probably just get one.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joel.
Joel Sabatka, Athletic Director at Valley Catholic High School in Beaverton, Oregon.
Carlos.
Carlos Arriaga, Athletic Director of St. Joseph Notre Dame High School in Alameda, California.
Mike.
Mike Watson, Athletic Director at De La Salle Collegiate High School in Warren, Michigan.
Eric.
Eric Wood, Athletic Director of Bishop Montgomery High School in Torrance.
And good morning, David. How are you?
Good morning. How's everybody?
So just, I guess we've always done, and I feel like every 2 weeks we do this, the updates are like another curveball. Anybody have any, just kind of around the horn, around your state, some updates on what's going on so we can kind of probably help us steer our conversation? I got some notes from last time we met, but just a quick national update on what you got going. And I have a couple of topics I think that a few of you texted me to see if we can talk about. And Jolene represents 10 schools and on a whole side of the Bay Area. So I wonder if if anyone has any updates on their campus athletics and what they're doing summer or even fall right now. Go ahead, Eric.
So we started with basketball last week, and then this week we added football, and we're going to be adding cross country next week. Just strictly training. They're doing conditioning work, and we're keeping them separated. Yesterday we had almost 50 kids for football. Orange County it's really interesting because in Orange County they're telling all the public schools to shut down, but LA County hasn't said anything like that yet. So we'll see what happens. The numbers seem to keep going up, but we're still going and looking at adding baseball also next week, possibly.
Are you going indoors for basketball?
Yes. So we have six in the gym at a time and 1 coach, and we're doing the health screening before they go in, and they're being kept separated. They're supposed to bring their own basketballs, and there's hand sanitizer, and it's about an hour of conditioning, and then they're out.
Got it. What's going on in the Western Catholic Athletic League?
Yeah, I was gonna say, can I go next?
Yeah.
Sorry guys, I'm gonna have to duck out soon. I'm actually teaching our section's new athletic directors workshop today for 6 hours on Zoom. So I don't know who I feel worse for, the ADs that are getting thrown into this new world, or just that I got to be on for 6 hours. So all my schools are following county guidelines, as I've shared before. We're across 3 different counties, so it's kind of interesting what schools can do and can't do, and how different counties are calling different things. It's outside, like Leo was saying up here, we're doing outside, small pods, or one of them calls them safety groups. I think most schools are body weight and strength and conditioning stuff, and then the strength and conditioning coach wipes down the equipment in between sessions, as well as in one of our counties you can have equipment as long as you're with that one person for the whole 3 weeks and you share the same equipment with that one person. So I know one of my schools is doing in a group of two where they're still 6 feet apart, but they could share a basketball. They can't play, but they can pass and stuff. So it's just hard. A lot of it is body weight. I'll be honest that a lot of, we've been doing it. We've been able to do this for a little bit in one of our counties. And I know there's some, as much as excitement and having the kids back around, I think the coaches are really emphasizing this is giving the kids an outlet and something to do. Because to be honest, I think it's, even the kids are kind of like, okay, well now what? And everybody's kind of chomping at the bit to do more. And just for sure up here in the Bay Area, it's, if anything, it's starting to be more like, okay, well, how can we take more back? I think like Eric was saying, we've been watching what's happening in Southern California and seeing if that's going to come up this way where counties shut back down conditioning. There's some discrepancy between county public departments and the state public department of health of what is allowed and not allowed. So we're trying to get clarification on all that. So.
What's going on in Michigan?
Well, it's a lot of the same in Michigan. However, here it's by region, not by county. So the state health department has made regions out of the state. And there's been, a few incidences as of recently that have caused some regions to regress. So for example, the Lansing area around the Capitol, they've regressed back to a lower step because of some outbreaks. Really, like Jolene says, we kind of get through the conditioning and the kids are what's next. And we are doing some outdoor strength and conditioning, excuse me, wiping down the stuff, doing those things, but it's pretty stagnant right now. We've been going since June 8th and just doing body weight and conditioning and just trying to get through it.
Joel, what's going on in Oregon?
We're hopeful we haven't started anything yet on our campus, and the governor had combined the 3 counties that make up the Metro Portland area, Washington, Multnomah, and Clackamas, about 21 days ago. And so this Friday would have been the day for all 3 counties to apply for phase 2 if things had been going well. But there was an article today that basically saying that all 3 won't even apply on Friday because we've had a spike in cases. There's certain criteria they need to meet, obviously, and one of them, even being able to trace the outbreaks, isn't going well. So I don't see us probably starting anything until the end of the month, if all goes well. We have a preschool on our campus too, and they were hopeful to open that this past Monday, and they've postponed that until July 20th. So we do have in our league, we have different counties. We have several coastal schools over on the Oregon coast, and they've been doing workouts for over a month, outside stuff. I know, they're able to throw footballs, try to keep things wiped down. But I think there's a little bit of, just people kind of doing their thing too, what they feel comfortable with. And so, but the position we're in most of the Portland area now is going to be probably on hold to get into phase 2 for at least a couple more weeks.
Hey, you got anything different in California going on in your county other than beautiful weather and great beaches?
No, I think it's very similar to everybody else. The issue that we're falling into is, especially like parents coming into us, is that clubs and the club sports are allowed to do everything. And so they're even having games. Now, it's not legal, but up and down the county, we're hearing about games being started and things. So then our parents get to look at that, and our parents are going, well, wait a minute, those are high school kids. They're participating. Why isn't the school? So I had to send out a letter to all of our parents kind of delineating that we're education-based athletics, and those are businesses, and we follow 2 separate rules. And so it seems to have calmed the waters a little bit, but it's difficult. And it looks like we may be rolling back too. They just put us on the watch list, and we're down for probably 3 weeks. It hasn't affected, they haven't talked about our camps yet, but if something doesn't change in the next 5 to 6 days, we could be on that list too, as rolling back and not allowing us to participate.
Carlos, you got anything? I know that you might be actually it's like perfect. It's the opposing viewpoints of what to be your side. What do you got on St. Joe's as a smaller Catholic school, in California?
Diocesan school, we're similar to what Joel is saying. We haven't started any activities yet. I think the superintendent of the diocese has been well connected with the state level on a number of committees and tied with I think the governor's office. So I think she's been ahead of the curve, at least in terms of understanding what's happening. So last week, we got a memo from the CIF state director saying, hey, make sure you check in with your counties. And I'm like, that's kind of strange. It was like a 2-liner. I'm sure Leo or Eric might have got it. I was like, that's something's going down. And sure enough, the State Department of Health had indicated that that youth sports, organized high school sports, is not part of the guidelines to allow activity. And so that's kind of where it's at. I'm just curious, for those others in California, what are you getting from your county regarding that?
Actually, that's one of the topics. We can roll into it. So here's my thing. Getting a call or email back from our county is like getting a call back from the Pope. It doesn't, at this point in time, it doesn't exist. Nobody will reply. So, and I'm sure it's the same in Oregon and Michigan, but for our intents and purposes, I think every school has to just follow the county guidelines. And when if you're not in compliance, you just deal with it, right? Like not any different than if you were a restaurant owner or the intentions for us are good. Although I would, just before we move on, I've never been more prepared to shut down. I have my draft email saying De La Salle summer activities have shut down. I actually sent an email this morning to our coaches saying, if the indicators are the indicators, I imagine we're next. So I think that's, that and the parent topic too, Carlos, is like at some point in time, and I wanted to ask you this, how and what are people saying to parents? Because it's getting complicated, you know what I mean? Like if you're Carlos and you don't do anything, you're Joel and you're not doing something, and if you're David and myself and Mike, you're doing stuff, and Eric, you're doing too much, and then what are, the club conversation. I can tell you this, the other day I had a conversation with my boss, and he's very cool about just letting us do what we need to do, and he trusts the leadership. But at some point in time, like David, you brought a good point. I'm of the opinion, I don't know what's fair or not fair anymore. And I think there's the other question of public versus private, that our parents keep asking us. They keep saying, we're a private school. Why can't you do what you need to do like a private business? So I think now the rubber is now meeting the road, and parents want answers on different topics. And so I'll just throw that out there. The two are kind of one and the same of what are, Cathedral versus Torrey Pines, you know what I mean? De La Salle versus Monte Vista, whatever, public, private, right next to you. It's like now there's the compare and contrast, and parents are asking questions. So I'll just throw that out there as, what are some ways of communicating out to the public, your public, and how you're handling it. So Carlos, I hear you. I don't know. That's kind of wanted to hear what people are saying to folks right now.
Yeah, I'll learn more today. We got our school. We had a meeting on Monday regarding start of school and school calendar, and 2 plans. That's getting rolled out to the parents today. So I'm sure those questions will come up, and I'll learn more. But I think we're at the point now. I'm at the point now where shifting mindset to say, okay, what kind of programming can we provide start of the fall? If we're not able to do activities, and I really, we need to come up with something, because I think parents want to know, hey, what are you guys offering? We're paying a hefty bill here. What are you going to be able to offer our kids that's of value?
Yeah, I don't know. Go ahead, Joel.
I was just going to say, in regards to school next fall, we had a letter went out to our parents, all of our K through 12 last week, saying that our goal is to have all kids on campus 5 days a week, and I think at this point that was kind of the only option. Like you had talked about, Leo, a couple meetings ago about kids leaving if it's going to be digital or in that. And I think that's our plan. I think on paper, they were able to make it work in the classroom as far as numbers, but we have a meeting tomorrow about traffic flow and all the other logistics that are going to come with this. And so I don't know how that's going to go. But it is interesting when you talk about what are you going to offer. I don't know what you guys have heard, in California as far as fall sports. I did hear yesterday from a fellow athletic director that, there's been a little bit of a push here to maybe flip the seasons, put the spring sports in the fall and the fall in the spring. And one of the ADs in our league was really pushing for that. And I think they've really kind of tabled that. And one of the things he heard was that they said, other than football, they felt pretty good at this point if we do have school for the other fall sports. So I don't know, that could be really, I think, just a really tough if they just don't do football. I think for us, we don't have huge numbers anyway. That would be a really a tough thing to have, to skip football for a year. I think you'd have kids lose interest, and it just might not be the same when it came back.
Yeah, for us, we are currently working on curriculum for intramural stuff. For instance, my freshman football coach and I have, it's crazy. Our numbers are like at 80 boys right now, right? Really, that's like 20% attrition. But so if and when we were able to come on campus, we would create some sort of like 4 teams of 15 or so, and then work out, use Saturdays, and we have a flex day in our schedule. So I think the challenge that I've posed to my coaches this month, the month of July, is how are you going to come back and, give me 5 different scenarios, whether we play against anyone or we play against ourselves. To your point, Joel, the emphasis is still obviously wellness, mental, social, all that stuff. But at the same time, we can't lose a year. Like for my freshman football coach, he was saying, well, I'm going to do a complete disservice to the football program if I offer nothing. He goes, and we're at that point where I have to kind of argue with the parents and the coaches about what is appropriate at this time. If we're not going to start football till, let's call it 2021, we haven't rushed to bring any freshmen on campus at all. We have that's like the least of my worries right now, because it's very complicated. But I do think, and that's kind of one of our topics could be like, what are you, talking about telling parents, like, what are you actually going to offer? And I think for us, we're going to have to continue to create a million programs. Our coaches are completely frustrated because I keep driving and hammering them down. And every idea they throw on the wall is not really compliant, because, I'm sure many of you feel the same way. They're not living the COVID-19 every hour with every text or every, piece of information. But it's definitely a challenging situation to explain to our constituents what we can and can't do. And it goes back to the private public thing. I don't know about where in your area, but we're thriving right now, because I think we, at least at minimal, the thought and the effort is there. Like, people are still hopeful to want to come back. I don't know. I think one of the things for parents, I would ask you guys, do you have like a regular community? We talked last time, and I had mentioned that we'd done a town hall and some people are doing email. Are you doing regular communication just through athletics? Because I think that's what's kind of got, Carlos, to your point, you're saying we're like kind of living in Disneyland out here. I think we have over communicated by sport, by level, by program, by department, which I think has kind of gotten us out. Like, even though we say we don't know, we wish we knew, we hope this, we don't know, and at the end it's like we said nothing, they still smile. It's a really odd scenario where you really tell them nothing for 5 minutes, but then they're happy. So I don't know if anyone has any round suggestions, on like what you're trying to do or not do with your communication process with the people after if you have a plan, Joel, to that extent. Like, you don't even know, but I don't know, Dave, I think you're going to say something.
Yeah, I think that you can never over communicate. So everybody's looking for some sort of hope that something's going to happen. And I know what we've been doing here is our coaches individually have been communicating constantly with their kids and trying to keep them abreast. As far as from the department, I've probably only put out 3 or 4 communications, since time, because as I told somebody the other day, we had a transfer student. They said, "Oh, what have I missed?" And I said, "Well, I'm sending out an informational, but it doesn't have any information in it." It's one of those things where, just like you said, you're given as much information as you can, but when you can't give them directives, it's tough. I even tell the parents, I said, this is probably one of the most frustrating things for an administrator to do is we're all about planning, and not having information to plan is something that is difficult. And I think by telling your parents that, it's fair. They take it. They go, okay, I understand. And you're right. They're all smiling. At least you're giving them information, and they're not wondering what's going to happen. So like I said, I don't think you could over communicate. Just continue. I have one going out. Actually, one went out yesterday, and just explaining the difference between club and our own group.
Hey, Dave, can you send that to us?
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be, I'd love to see that and maybe adjust it for us. I know right now, I think for us, everyone seems to be kind of waiting for that July 20th CIF announcement of the calendar. And I don't know what they're going to do, but it seems to be, that's what a lot of schools down here are waiting on. The public schools are not doing anything. They're completely shut down. They had a plan to come back in late July, but they're kind of still waiting to see what CIF does on July 20th.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Joel, go ahead.
I was just going to ask a question. Those of you that have started back, and Leo, you guys have been doing stuff. I asked a public school athletic director right near us in Beaverton, and they had put together like a 23-page return to play guidelines for their district. It was kind of getting slow played a little bit in their administration. It hadn't been approved yet. They had initially talked about starting next Monday, but I don't even know if that's going to happen. And I asked him his greatest concern, with everything coming back and doing that. And he said his was coaches following the guidelines to make sure that everything is handled correctly, in that regard. And I just was, thinking about that. And obviously that's a concern, but I just thought I'd throw that out there to you guys. What has been your greatest concern, or has it changed since you've started back working on things and working with kids?
It's been the social distancing.
Yeah, I can answer that too. For us, exactly what Eric said. It's been the social distancing. It's getting them to follow the rules. It's getting the coaches to, even though when the kids get together, it looks like a normal activity, they want the kids to be around each other. It's about separating them and making sure they're following the guidelines. And Joel, like you in Michigan, there's been talk of switching the seasons, and we're lucky enough to have our Detroit Catholic League director on the governor's committee. It's the only athletics person on the governor's committee. And someone mentioned they were just spitballing and throwing things against the wall. And one said about flipping the seasons. And, the governor said, oh, that's intriguing. And then somebody planted the question at the press conference, and she said, our state association can do what they want to, but I'd like for them to study it. So of course that immediately went out to, we're going to switch seasons and all of the implications that go along with that. So our process really has been for me to have weekly coaches meetings, and then take the information from those weekly coaches meetings and kind of do some myth busting with parents so that it comes from one consolidated source. As to what actually is going on versus what's being considered, what do we know and what will we be doing, and what could we do and what could we be doing. And just, again, like David said, saying you don't know is an important factor, because then the parents at least know what your thought process is. And I think they all understand and are reasonable enough to understand that, things are up in the air, but they just want to know what's being considered. And I think our coaches and kids are that way too. So it's been my effort to go and talk to those kids when they're working out and explain things to them, reinforce what they should be doing, not as kind of a gotcha, but really as taking care of each other so that we can actually have sports, and how it starts with us. So if we say that we're leaders and those things, then it has to start with us, even if it might not be a popular thing, even in their own homes. So there's a lot of kids that go home and say, oh, the masks are foolish, or we're not going to wear a mask, or this is all overblown. It simply doesn't matter. For us to be successful, we have to follow the rules and do the things that take care of each other. So that's kind of been our process.
The biggest I'd say, Joel, is simple for me is so our address is 1130 I always tell people we're really buttoned up and tight on campus on 1130 Winton Drive. Unfortunately, once they cross the street or get in their car, it's very difficult to be I can't pick up and take a kid to their house and back to practice every day. And that was always an issue, right? But now it's even more of an issue because I would say every other at best is, adhering to county and state guidelines. Obviously, us in California know that because the numbers are out of control, or why, there's got to be a reason. So for us, the multiple Zooms and the parents, it's almost, I don't know, for lack of a better word, in some of those topics, you take this is a not up for discussion moment as an administrator with the parents, you have to put your fist down. I feel bad because I'm not trying to be aggressive and mean during the pandemic, but it's almost, I've always had to state one of the lines that has kind of evolved in the communication is it's up for every family to maintain and adhere to state and county guidelines. Now, their interpretation of state and county guidelines at their house could be a 50-person graduation party with no masks. So that is, I think we all work in collaboration and partnership. Those are all the kinds of words at a Catholic school we all talk about, with our families. But the collaboration is off the wall. Going back to the parents, we have a sector, and I don't know if I was going to ask this question. We have a sector of doctors who are, for lack of a better word, on one side of the spectrum, think they are on here's some medical information that does not tell you that you need to be acting like you're doing. So now we're managing little pockets of opinion. And it's not, they're entitled to their opinion, right? So I can't stop them, but so we are constantly trying to manage off-campus expectations, interpretations, and really to Mike's point, it's still going to always be the catchphrase. We're going to have to follow state and county guidelines. I imagine if you're Carlos, you're going to have to put in diocesan guidelines. So I think that's going to be one of the challenges is the myths, the truths, the realities, and it's going to change. I just texted my boss saying, be prepared for us to shut down today if we get a similar Orange County tweet for our county. So I think the one thing the two words that I think came out our town hall 2 weeks ago that I ran, and my boss actually said, he mentioned to me that I said it and I had no idea. But I used two words, was patience and flexibility. You almost kind of have to stick with the 3 words and just keep finishing off and just remind them, because I just think it's one of those things where it's going to be like this for 2 years. We haven't even gotten into part 4 of our, like what happens when we all know our season's in 2 weeks and we realize St. Joe's at De La Salle High School, but they test positive on their basketball court and we're like, game over. You know what I mean? So who knows all those things. So I think, for lack of a better word, everyone kind of needs their hashtag and needs to kind of just drive it home on a daily basis. Here's the other thing too. I picked our mode of communication would only be Twitter with a link to our website. So whatever story, and obviously email, but I just kind of keep those to a minimal like Dave did. But anything that I think is major, we've just decided that posting on our website, so it always goes back to one site, but then always just taking that link and I just tweet it or put it on social, our communications team does. So it's like always goes back to one spot. So you don't have to keep saying, where did it come from? So I think that's one tip I'd say is, I forget what we titled on our website, but I think it just says COVID-19 updates or something. So it's just athletics and blah, blah, blah. So everything is there. So even if on a whim, you have to go back and say, well, I posted it on 7/8. So I'm sorry you missed it. You were on vacation. So that'd be that's kind of where we're at right now.
Has anybody started to think about programming outside of, physical activity? Obviously, we'd all like to get back, and some of us are already getting back to some activity, but when school starts, has anyone started to go down that road? One thought I had is really, look into this group on a local and national level to maybe, if we are at that point, to come up with some sort of programming that we can incorporate our student athletes, that student athlete focus. Maybe calling upon our partners to help us with that in terms of connections with athletes or coaches that maybe can speak to our kids to bring value to our schools.
Yeah, I think our coaches, that for us, I'll just say our coaches have the challenge of trying to keep people entertained. Right now, Carlos, for De La Salle, I think our spring coaches have kind of said, you know what, we had a rough spring. We're staying away from everybody. They're giving, you know, everything from our 3 to 4 day week workouts that they can do on, you know, at home. And, but I will say one of the ideas that our strength and conditioning came up with, so we're creating at-home packets right now. That's kind of maybe a segue to our next topic. Like, what are we prepared for when we have to go back shelter in place, whether it's in the middle of the flu and cold season for 3 weeks. So we've created at-home workout things. So that's like foam rollers, bands, kettlebells, just stuff that they can use at home. So that, because we learned, so basically for me, the challenge was, what do we learn from when we had to go shelter in place and could not connect at all on a whim? And what I found is that some of our kids, like all Catholic schools, right, we're very diverse. We have different, that's our mission, right? We're not going to be the same all the way. Some kids had stuff, some kids didn't have stuff. So we're creating that, like, for instance, like football's got a duffel bag, and right now they have all their stuff, but it's actually worked out dual because we have no lockers. So now we've created like a roving locker room / at home / we'll just keep adding equipment / you know, I think so for us, for programming, that's been number one on the physical side, but I know you're talking non-physical. I think you tap into your alum. I think you tap into great speakers. I just think our coaches are right at the pause phase right now. They're really praying that they don't have to be all digital all day for 6 months. You know what I mean? So I think they've taken a 6 to 7 week like Zoom away from it, or just away from each other. I think people got sick of each other. You know, like our tennis coach goes, he goes, what do you want me to do? I can't really Zoom them anymore at 5 o'clock. They're just not, it's not good. You know, they're just looking at each other angry because they can't see each other and there's no programs. I have no answer. So it's a delicate, I don't know, speaking for Dave and Mike and Eric, it's kind of a delicate over communication with the kids. You don't want to do too much. And it's actually, one mom told me there's a lot of pressure for her son to figure out how to get online at every certain time, you know, and he's forgetting. He's 16 years old, doesn't really know what's going on. He's angry, confused. He's got no one to talk to. So it's the emotional game. It's going to be really interesting the next 3 to 5 months, especially if you're football players and now you have no season. I don't think anyone on our campus thought that fall or winter sports were going to get affected when this pandemic started. So now it's like the whole wave of people. Spring was already mad, right? They were already mad, displaced. Now it's a different bunch of emotions, especially, you know, we obviously do well in football, right? That's our deal. And there's a lot of football stuff, but like, I've never seen so many egos and so many hearts broken from adult parents and coaches. It's like their identity has been stripped away, you know, and so to your point, counteracting that, I don't know the answer. So I'd love to hear what people are addressing. You know, maybe that, again, that's part 4. It's good that we keep meeting because I think it helps us think over a 2-week period on how to get these things done.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, publicly, I'm not putting that out there because I think you guys are right. You know, I want to give everybody hope and, you know, and go down the road, like that plan that we're going to be able to do something. But, you know, but privately, I think we do have to start thinking about something. And even if it's like a programming situation where maybe it's once a week or once every 2 weeks that we have, maybe it's a CNAA, you know, speaker series that everybody can join in or be a part of nationally, that we have, you know, a high profile athlete speak on some sort of topic that would grab the kids' attention. I don't know. I just think we have to start thinking about some things. It doesn't have to be a huge thing, but it also will provide some relief for some of the coaches who are feeling like, gosh, what do I do? What do I come up with? Some will be very good and creative about coming up with stuff on their own and do it privately, which I think they would still do. But this would be something that for everybody and be, you know, and help support our coaches in that regard.
Yeah. Usually I will tell you, to Davis' point, club baseball, club volleyball, different trainers, like our basketball guys were like, they came to our hour workout yesterday for the first day. And you know, they're miffed at why I was yelling at them for washing their hands, wearing a mask. And then at the end of it, they go, oh, I'm going to go work out with my AAU team. So I think that's where a lot of our people are right now. They're doing things. That's why off our campus, I think they're fine. I think they're functioning at beaches, going for mountain bike rides, sitting in people's backyards. I don't think they care. Honestly, there's no school. So I actually think that's why we're getting away with kind of pausing and not communicating with the kids every day. Cause I really believe they're hanging out. I could be way wrong, but our kids are definitely not alone right now. You know, they're physically connected, guaranteed.
Leo, I agree with you there. I think our kids are connecting outside of our address, just like yours. I think when I'm talking about communicating, I'm talking about communicating to the parents. You know, they're the ones they're worried. They're the ones that are saying, "Oh, my kid's missing their season. They're missing opportunities for scholarships." All that, whether it's true or not, that's all going through their heads. And if we can communicate to the parents and give them the hope that we're moving forward and that we're prepared. That's the other thing I think that's most important, is that our parents understand that regardless of what's happening, we're going to be patient, we're going to be flexible, but we'll also have a plan in place. So whatever happens, we're ready to act and be leaders. As our community leaders, we're ready to go. And I think that that's what our parents want to hear from us, that at least at our place.
Before I forget, because I think, Carlos, this will probably help you and Joel. Has any, Eric, Mike, or David, have you guys progressed your policy on a positive or a potential exposure to COVID? You know, so let's get a little bit of practical. You know, we just recently, it took us 6 weeks to even get it together, right? And I think we're closer. Is you guys have one, have you had one? You know what I mean? And two, or do you have you kind of outlined your policy procedure a little bit more since we've started? Everyone's about a month into this or so, or whatever. Eric's, you know, just recently started. But has anyone incurred a situation?
Not yet.
I can say that our athletic trainer got COVID early on, and when we went on shutdown, she became a frontline worker at the hospital that we contract with, and she contracted COVID. And so this was really our first wake up to, you know, all these policies and procedures are great, but what do we do when somebody gets COVID? And it's taken a while, and I would still say that it's a policy that's in progress. Some of it's really common sense. Other stuff is really pretty practical. How do we separate people? How do we, you know, we report to the county certainly, but just like you said, Leo, getting calls back from our county or from our health department can be pretty troublesome sometimes. We don't have direction, so we have to do the best we can. So to be quite honest, we're probably not all the way there yet, but we have had a couple cases. We had a couple of former parents pass away from COVID. And, you know, every time I talk to kids, I have them raise their hand to those who had been affected by COVID in some way, whether it's somebody in their family or somebody that they care about that's gotten sick. And, you know, the numbers of kids raising their hand can continue to rise. And so if they know somebody, you can assume that in some way, shape, or form, they may have been in contact with somebody. So I don't think there's any doubting that some of our kids are silent carriers of COVID. So we have to be prepared, and it's been frustrating that we've been slow to develop solid policies on that, but we're well on our way. But it's been frustrating, it's been difficult, but all in the vein of trying to do the right thing at the right time by kids and coaches and families. So we're not all the way there, but we have had some cases, and we're trying to continue to develop our policy and protocol really based on what has been happening with people.
Yeah, before I forget, our athletic trainer, Kent Mercer, and he's reached out to a couple different people across the country. They're going to do a pre-recorded, I'm trying to get them to get it live, but you know, athletic trainers, they don't ever want the limelight. But I'll send out an email. They're going to do a Q&A kind of COVID update for CNAA in terms of, and David, you sent me that. So we're going to push that out. Carlos, talk about different segments about, you know, everything from return to play from an athletic trainer side, covering what student athletes could and can be doing. So that's going to be a topic you'll see coming up, because it's going to be one of those things where athletic trainers are going to need to pick off information, everything from just, you know, how much, look, one of the big, Mike's talking about, like, we're talking about positive tests. I can't figure out how much sanitizer I'm supposed to buy. Our maintenance guy is like, dude, you guys are out of control. You're going to have to purchase $1 billion more of sanitation. And, we've been looking at the robots and we've been looking at all those. And so I think, so we have a subset of conversation that with athletic trainers. 'Cause I asked my athletic trainer to probably just do one weekly for like 30 minutes because someone's going to want to hear something about how they handled it. I would tell you we're working on our flow chart for the positive tests. We've had a couple answer our fourth question is, have you been in contact with anyone for that? And we haven't got to where we're going to the county yet, but we're anticipating it happening. And I can tell you between HIPAA, between the legal, it's an ever-changing information. I think it's going to be one of the more confusing deals. It definitely, I wish the county in this case would actually just take the lead and say, here's the document you have to follow, because we're just scared to have the wrong policy. But even on the days we pick, how everyone thinks, is it 5 days? Is it 2 days? Is it 14 days of quarantine? So we have definitely been, for lack of a better word, we have a baseline and we're editing daily, and it's literally on the document says subject to change because I don't know what else we can do. But I think it'll be interesting if we get a bunch of Catholic athletic trainers from across the country to hear their perspective on what they think. Because I don't know if anyone has a perfect, foolproof plan, unless you are the county or state. Maybe they have one, but who knows?
There was a secondary. I'll see if I can get a hold of it. There was a secondary NATA athletic training secondary school presentation maybe a couple weeks ago that I was able to get able to hear. But I don't have on the day of, and I don't have the recording. But maybe that can get distributed out. Kenton probably has access to that. But it was really, really good. I think it'd be worthwhile to hear again.
Right. So we've sent kids to get tested this past month because they answered. So they went from possible exposure to whatever the case might be. And so we've gone that far, right? We've got the negative testing return. So it's kind of a weird moment because it pretty much puts your program in pause, mentally, and you can't talk about it either. That's the oddity right now.
Yeah, I agree with that. We had a kid who did not end up coming to campus when we opened up because he got COVID from one of the AAU programs he was participating in. And 14 days later, I said, okay, well, he's ready to come back. And I said, well, let's hold on. He needs a test before he comes back. And he came back and he tested positive. So 14 days is not something that's in stone. Like I said, we've revamped our protocols to say before coming back, you have to be tested.
I think we're all going to face too the rumors. I hear why so and so wasn't at campus or so and so wasn't at the practice. They have COVID. How and we're going to have to be able to respond to those situations and manage those emotions that will be tied to that.
Leo, I was going to ask too, I saw a picture on Twitter, a couple of student athletes, girls basketball players at ours, took a little picture and said, hey, this training camp's done. This team's off to Indianapolis tomorrow for a tournament. I got to thinking okay, so they go, a couple of girls go play in Indianapolis, fly on a plane, go play in Indianapolis. And then say if we were open and we were doing basketball workouts, do we owe that to the other kids in our program and our coaches to quarantine them or, restrict them from coming in our gym if they've traveled and done that? I know our campus as a whole, we've got a nursing home and a convent. If anyone custodial leaves the state, they get quarantined for 14 days when they return. So that got me thinking, even myself, do I want to be in the gym if they come back from this trip and have been flying and actually playing basketball games, live games against people from all over the country,
Similarly, our first football game is against a school in Chicago. And so we've obviously been in contact with that school, St. Patrick's High School in Chicago, with regard to whether we're going to play the game or not. But, one of the afterthoughts was just like you said, Joel, is what happens when our kids come back? That's a drivable thing, but it's out of state. So we're still trying to discuss what we would do with those kids once they return from an out of state trip. Well,
I can tell you what they're doing in the Silicon Valley for a lot of companies, Joel. They're if you're an employee that leaves the county, you got to tell them. I think they're okay in state because it's hard to, state county lines are about 1.5 feet, right? You jump on one side or the other. If you leave the state, you're supposed to tell them, and then you quarantine yourself for 14 days without pay. That's how Silicon Valley is handling. I mean, they're telling you to stay home anyways in general, but if you leave and you're on campus, so we're at that point now where we're having those conversations. How do we implement that, or do we not implement that with our faculty, staff, and our community? Yeah, I think I have a suspicion 2 weeks from now, it's good that we have kind of a similar group here. We don't overlap topics, but I think it's interesting that I think, as we talk about future topics, I have a planned Zoom at the end of the month with our entire coaching staff, because it's been a while. So that's everyone from the assistant freshman football coach all the way to the pole vault coach, right? All the way to the end of the season. Because I think we're at that point now where we're going to have to tell coaches, we talked about it earlier, like if you don't follow these policies, that's okay, but you can't coach here. You know what I mean? So, and we've added language in our handbook. I just saw the final from my president and our attorney about the COVID-19. It's like a 2-paragraph during the COVID season, blah, blah, blah. All this. I mean, so everything, yeah, I think we have to brace as administrators to how we're gonna work with our own staff and redundancy. So I have an associate AD. I keep telling them when I'm sleeping on the air mattress next to a microwave and a Yeti of water, if I'm quarantined for 14 days, you're in charge, man. Like I'm out. So be ready. So I think we all have to put these contingency plans. My head basketball coach is young and dumb. I love him. I coached him, but I think he thinks nothing's going to happen. I'm like, you're going to play a basketball game and half your team won't be there one day, so you should get over this. And I told him, I said, I think we all have coaches like this. He's the worst practice planner. Like, if you were to ask him, show me the plan for today's hour workout, he'd be like, it's all right here, and he has it. But so even just putting things in writing, because you're going to have to hand it off to the next person. David's going to have to, his administrative assistant might have to be, returning every call for 5 days. Cause he's like, I don't know, I had a cough. So I'm just going to stay home and I can't do any of this stuff. So I think it's good. I think that's what we're probably gonna have to talk about, our mental health and wellness. As in our position as athletic administrators is going to be tested probably more than ever. And we're going to be exposed to every sport. I got 21 groups on campus and I'm technically around all of them, right? Like far away, but we're the ones right now in the summer. I mean, my boss hasn't been on campus in 8 weeks. I'm here every other day checking on things. So I think I'm just writing down like future topics. That's going to be one of them. It's like, how are we telling our coaches what is the new normal? What's the definition of how you have to coach at your school here? I have a suspicion we're going to lose at least 20% of our coaches, because a couple of them already told me, said, I'm just going to ride out the pandemic and I'll come back in 2023. It's just not worth it. I don't want to get sick. I don't want to, whatever the reason might be. And you have to respect it. So that's going to be an interesting Zoom for me, for lack of a better word, a state of the union to the athletic department to say, here's where we're at. And and that's after the CIF, makes their decision, after we kind of decide a little bit more on timing and, and it might be Little League style where it's like, hey, you're only practicing 2 days a week for freshman baseball because that's how many, we can't get everybody on campus at the same time. You know what I mean? So it's going to be, Carlos, you talked about programming. That's the mesh of, it's going to be daunting, like, hey, you have to do you can only get in the weight room once a week when you're not in season. So you got to do 2 Zoom workouts or, so all this stuff, all that stuff is on the wall, and it's just going to be, we have job security. You guys can all smile. They're going to need us. But at the same time, it's a crazy job description that was never put in place. It'd be good to be the department chair for PE right now at some schools. It's a lot simpler. But yeah, so I think that's a good topic. And we have a few minutes, does anybody have two things, any topics that we want to just continue to keep rolling on this every 2 weeks sort of deal? Again, we could talk forever, but I think, and I just kind of set this group to kind of just go every 2 weeks to kind of, I've had different people invited that just, not everyone can get on. But just wanted to see if you had some other stuff we can push to the next time, and we'll just list it and we could take it away and keep going every 2 weeks and catching in. I think it's positive to hear what people are thinking and doing.
Does anybody have using an online platform for workouts? You know, obviously you can do Zoom, but is there, you know, any sort of apps or that you guys have used with your strength coach or just staff as a department that might be worthwhile to look at if we aren't able to get on campus?
Train Heroic. So we've been using it for 3 or 4 years.
What is it?
Train, Train, Heroic, HER or OIC. I can't spell, man. All I can do is type.
All right.
I'll send you guys a link. So we have all our video log, everything's cataloged. So I would have never thought our strength and conditioning coach and athletic trainers would be the most important, but they're probably the most important people on campus right now on a daily basis. So I'll send that over. Anybody have any other topics they want to talk about or cover? Going through. All right. Well, that being said, keep up the good fight. In 2 weeks, where everyone in California will know.
Yep.
So our Wednesday, here's my prediction. Our Wednesday in 2 weeks will be the private versus, I'll guarantee this topic, private versus public on 7, whatever date that is, 7/22. That would be my suspicion. What are people going to do given what has been outlined by their state association? You know, and what do your parents want to do? I mean, the club world, you know, is the club world smart enough to take everybody's money and say, just come over here, we'll break the law. You know what I mean? Just, and it doesn't matter. You don't have to wait 8 months to play basketball. We'll just do it here in whatever county. David's smiling because I think it's close. I think
They're already doing it.
yeah, most of the club coaches aren't that smart, but the power ones like surf down there, David, for soccer, I'm sure they're just gonna. It might be in my mind, it might be the resurgence of the whole European sort of athletics where it's club and high school. Unfortunately, I think some of us are gonna have to get really, really creative and work collaboratively to keep people from departing from high school athletics and the club world saying we just do what we want. So that would be my prediction. Our conversation would be private versus public sector, club versus educational athletics, and in your area.
We have
Leo, has there been any talk or any of the California ADs, has there been any talk if you guys shut things down, are you worried about transfers out of state, especially in the border kind of cities?
Yeah, it's already been happening.
Yeah.
Slowed down because Arizona went upside down on their numbers though.
Okay. Yeah, it's been rumored here with Ohio and Indiana kind of taking some of our kids from Southern Michigan. It's also been talked about that, you know, the Upper Peninsula in Michigan is very rural, but if they make it available where the Upper Peninsula can play, and some sports have their own championships in the Upper Peninsula, we may see kids transferring to, you know, cabins or whatever they have in the Upper Peninsula. So that's been happening here too.
Yeah, and David will tell you there's different parts of California, like the northern part. I'm pretty sure they're going no matter what. That's why I'm curious to see what Oregon's doing, because some of those counties that are pretty sparse, they're planning on playing a triple round robin schedule with like 5 to 8 schools and there's nothing anyone can do to stop them. The Catholic schools are in NorCal. It'll be interesting if a decision has to be made between, you know, what is and what is not allowable. I think the conversation will take place. To Carlos's point, we have to offer some programming, and the public sector is just going to do nothing, is what I would anticipate, right? They're just going to say the State Board of Education said we're shut down. They'll just accept it, right? And if David does nothing at Cathedral, he will lose students immediately. Yeah, I imagine we all will. So we're all going to be forced to do something. So I think that would be, to Carlos's point, programming and the private versus public sector conversation, club versus, I mean, those will be 3 good topics for what's going on in your state.
we had several club soccer programs start their tryouts on Monday. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, we're talking age, 8 to seniors in high school, huge clubs that's just started up Monday. And a little bit nervous that what could happen with them could impact us. You know, if they have kids start getting sick, you know, is that going to then put a scare into our administration to say, hey, what are we doing? You know, and so it's interesting, but there's so many kids and they've lost so much money from the spring, but they've also charged money and they're not really looking to give refunds. They're trying to figure out something to keep that money that people have already paid for the entire year or whatever it may be.
Yeah, we're going to have a banger of it. Well, I can already forecast 2 weeks from now. It's going to be pretty interesting. All right. Well, it's almost, I don't take up too much time. I'm going to try to get, like I said, if you have some female, different perspective, different area, you know, always continue. We're going to keep doing different topics. Especially I think once we ramp up where people know what's going on for the next school year, we'll start to segment the different populations between strength and conditioning, athletic training. You know, I'd like to start getting our head coaches maybe together on different topics. I think it'd be a good idea if we can start putting head coaches talking about the future of tennis, the future of this, the future of that. So just keep that in mind. I'll keep you in communication. I appreciate everybody because I think we're all getting something out of it. It's good to see someone different other than our families and our internal constituents too. So, I appreciate everybody and have a great week and be safe. And California guys, be ready. Coming.
Hang on tight.
Yep.
See you guys, Joel, David, Mike,
Take care.
Eric.
Take
Good
care,
seeing you guys.
You know.
Very good.
Take care.
Bye-bye.